Hey folks, we have a good one for you today, a little bit about insurance liability from a different standpoint rather than estate planning. And many families spend years building wealth, purchasing homes, growing businesses, investing in real estate, and creating estate plans designed to protect the people they love. What surprises many of them is that some of the greatest risks to those assets don't come from market crashes or taxes. They come from lawsuits, liability claims, accidents, and insurance gaps that they didn't even know existed. A trust alone won't stop a lawsuit. An LLC alone won't stop a lawsuit. And even a large umbrella policy may not provide the protection you think it does. At Zammitti Law, we believe true asset protection requires a coordinated approach between your estate plan, your business structure, your insurance coverage, and your long-term goals. That's why we regularly help clients identify potential vulnerability and work alongside their insurance advisors, financial professionals, and tax advisors to create a more complete protection strategy. In this video, we're going to walk through the questions every trust owner, business owner, property owner, and family should be asking before a claim ever occurs. Because the best time to discover a gap in your protection is before someone else does. For more estate planning, asset protection, and business succession guidance, you can visit us at yourplanningattorney.com for a free consultation. What is an umbrella policy? Let's start with the most misunderstood insurance product in America, the umbrella policy. What is essentially is a coverage that sits above, like an umbrella, your underlying insurance. It provides additional liability coverage and it protects against lawsuits and judgments. For example, if you have an auto policy that's $500,000 and your umbrella policy of $2 million, if there's an auto accident, you have potential total coverage of $2.5 million. Now, the common misconception is that it covers everything, but it only covers what the policy actually says it covers. Remember, insurance is a contract. So the questions to ask: what assets are insured, who is insured, and what activities are covered. So before you buy more umbrella coverage, the first question isn't how much coverage you need. It's whether the assets you're trying to protect are covered at all. Now, one of the biggest surprises for trust owners is discovering that putting an asset into a trust doesn't automatically mean it's insured. For example, we have a home that was placed in a trust and the insurance still shows John and Mary Smith. The trust isn't listed and then a potential claim arises. So what do we have to do? We want to make sure you have a name insured, which is you as the primary individual, and typically an additional insured of the trust. Depending on what type of assets you own within the trust, it's possible your insurance provider would suggest having a trust endorsement that actually changes the underlying contract. But I think that's more so maybe if it's like you have an automobile owned by the trust, which is not typical, at least in my scenario and the way that we guide our clients. But additional insured is definitely a key there. So the questions to ask here are, has my insurance company been notified that I now own this new asset under the trust, such as your home? And is my trust listed as the additional insured? Let's give a quick story as an example, right? Client transfers the house into the trust and they never update the insurance. Years later, a claim occurs and now the covered questions arise. And this is why we have all of our trust clients add their trust to their insurance policy as an additional insured. A trust can be an excellent planning tool, but if the insurance company doesn't know the trust owns the asset, you may have created a problem instead of solving one. Most people focus on protecting beneficiary, and almost nobody focuses on protecting trustee. So trustees, by the way, can be sued for multiple things: breach of fiduciary duty, investment decisions that have gone awry, distribution disputes, and administrative mistakes. Successor trustees after your passing are often family members who can be unprepared for this responsibility. And this is why we provide proper professional guidance in helping to eliminate these trip-ups that can create liabilities for those who will be left in charge. So the questions to ask here are, is my trustee covered? Does my trust own high-risk assets? And is fiduciary liability insurance appropriate and available? When you're naming a trustee, you're giving someone significant responsibility. So you should make sure you're always thinking about their protection as well. Rental property. So if I had to rank assets by lawsuit potential, rental properties would be probably pretty near the top. There's a potential for slip and falls. tenant injuries, fire claims, and of course, negligent maintenance, whether that's you or someone else handling it. How do we protect against this? I think a layered approach is the most appropriate. You have the ownership of the property, you have the insurance, okay, an umbrella insurance, but the property itself is owned by the LLC, and the LLC is owned by your trust. There's some layers in there to ensure that you have as much protection as possible. So the questions to ask are whether the LLC is insured, whether the trust is insured, and does the umbrella extend to rental? Super important. Owning rental property without reviewing your liability structure is a little like driving without checking whether the brakes still work. If you are a real estate owner and want more information, check out 𝘀𝗲𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃plan.com for more videos and other resources. Now, one of the most dangerous phrases I hear is, I have an LLC, so I'm protected. Now, an LLC does, of course, create separation between you and the entity and the assets owned by that entity. And it does help limit liability. For the most part, the strongest liability is that under the LLC, in most scenarios, that protect your personal assets from being touched, okay? But the LLC does not stop lawsuits, doesn't replace insurance, and it can't hold back every single claim. So where does this become a problem? If you've provided a personal guarantee outside of the structure of the LLC, clearly they can collect against that. If you started commingling funds, right? You don't have a separate bank account for your LLC. Well, you're one and the same. And so someone could possibly get to either of those buckets. And sometimes, depending on the structure of the business, if you're not following the proper operations for that business and keeping up with the corporate books, again, there's a way for a creditor to get through that to your other asset. So what are the questions to ask here? Does the LLC have insurance? Does it need a commercial umbrella policy? And are operations being conducted correctly? An LLC is definitely a shield. Insurance is armor, and the strongest path is to use both. Now, many business owners assume their personal umbrella covers their business, and in many cases, it really does not, right? Your personal umbrella is going to cover things that are supplemental to your homeowners or your auto insurance under personal vehicles. And your commercial umbrella should cover your business operations, commercial real estate, and maybe employee type expenses such as maybe excess workers' compensation, or something like that. So to give two kind of functional examples, if we have, like, say, a contractor, right? He could have, more likely to have workers' compensation issues, physical injury liabilities, and things like that. Now, someone such as myself, an attorney, this commercial umbrella really only covers additional general liabilities and, of course, maybe supplemental employee type expenses, but it's not going to cover excess malpractice insurance. So if you're in a profession like an attorney, a doctor, or something that has a high lawsuit rate, you want to check that out as well, as that may apply to you. Now, the questions to ask: do I need commercial umbrella insurance? What activities are excluded? And are my LLCs covered? The bigger the business, the more dangerous it becomes to assume your personal property has you covered. Now, we see this insurance issue arise when we have out-of-state property. This is a problem that we see all the time with snowbird clients owning homes in the South, right? We're in the Northeast, New Jersey, New York is where we practice. And we have a lot of clients who have property in the Carolinas, down in Florida, right? Example, right? New York resident, winter home in Florida. The client assumes that one policy protects everything. That's not always true. You do have to make sure that you have proper coverage. So the questions to ask: is every property listed? Is every state covered? Have ownership changes been reported, whether that's in a trust, LLC, or what have you? If you own property in multiple states, your liability review should be just as multi-state as your real estate. Say that 10 times fast. All right. Now, let's answer the question I guess everyone does ask: how much umbrella coverage should I buy? This comes down to a few, I guess there's several variables, but the three top ones I would say are net worth, your exposure, and your lifestyle. So net worth: do you have a lot at risk? And as that grows, you should likely increase that coverage. Do you work in a highly sued industry? And are you a little bit more risky in your choices in everyday life? So let's throw some examples out there. Think of a family A where their net worth is $500,000, they're W-2 employees, and they're homebodies. Their insurance coverage is going to have a different outlook from family B, who has a $3 million net worth. He's a doctor, or someone's a doctor with their own office, and they race motorcycles for fun. Probably a little more risk. In family C, they have a 10 million plus net worth. They do an online business selling stuff, very little liability there, and they travel a lot, but nothing too risky. Each of these requires a different consideration and outcome. And as such, this requires specific conversation and discussion to determine what type of coverage, estate plan, and other pieces together will provide the best protection, including maybe entity creation. Okay, so your coverage should reflect, again, your assets, your income, your risk profile. And these are not just arbitrary numbers. The goal isn't buying the biggest umbrella. The goal is buying enough protection to make a lawsuit less financially devastating. And you should know too, umbrella policies are normally not super expensive. It is a great tool to offset maybe a denied claim or not enough coverage on your underlying insurance. Okay, so let's talk about the 3-layer asset protection sandwich. If you remember nothing else from this video, please remember these 3 layers. Layer number 1, this is your base, your ownership structure, right? You have your LLC owned by your trust, typically an LLC. Corporations are there, but I would say an LLC for the most part. And that is owned by your trust. That's your ownership structure, layer 1. Layer 2, you have your primary insurances, homeowners, auto, landlord, commercial, right? That's your base insurance layer over your trust LLC layer. So we've just done our base layer and our meat section of our sandwich, or cheese section, or hummus section if you're vegan. And your top layer is this excess coverage, right? Your personal umbrella, your commercial umbrella, and any excess liability coverage. You want to have all 3 pieces to make sure you're fully protected. And no one of those layers really solves everything. Each layer supports the other. Asset protection isn't one document, and it isn't one insurance policy. It is a system and/or sandwich in my case. I must be hungry. All right, now ask yourself these final questions all together, right? Are my assets properly titled? Does my insurance reflect current ownership? Is my trust listed? Are my LLCs insured? Do I have the right umbrella coverage? Has everything been reviewed recently? The families who best avoid financial disasters aren't always the wealthiest. They're the families who understand where the gaps are before a claim ever happens, because the best asset protection strategy isn't winning a lawsuit, it's making sure the lawsuit never destroys what you've spent a lifetime building. So if you've ever created a trust, own rental property, have an LLC, or haven't reviewed your insurance coverage or estate planning years, now is the time to have those conversations, because the most expensive liability problem is usually the one nobody knew existed. We hope that you've learned something new here today. Please share if you did, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.